Hello everyone, it's Snowflarky Zemos here today, and I am bringing you my Reversal Quiz deck profile. Reversal Quiz is probably my favorite alternate win condition type of deck that exists in Yu-Gi-Oh! Big fan of this deck for a long time, and I played it for a long time. One of my go-to decks for tournament play, especially during the Duelist Alliance and Necros format era. It did a lot of work for me there, winning me quite a few locals that I went to and doing pretty well at other tournaments that I had went to. And I played it pretty much as my main go-to deck for tournament play until Performapal Damage Juggler and Cyber Dragon Infinity kind of came out and kind of put a death to this deck because it got a lot harder to play. But I've decided to revisit it, see what I can do with it now. So what you're seeing here is my first initial kind of rough draft build of playing Reversal Quiz again in my dueling group. So with that, we'll get into the cards. Before we break down the individual card by card of Reversal Quiz, I kind of feel like I should just explain what Reversal Quiz is and what this deck does to win. So if you've never seen Reversal Quiz is a spell card that when you activate it, you send all cards in your hand and on your side of the field to the graveyard. Then you call the type of card, monster, magic, or trap, on top of your deck. And if you call it right, you exchange your current life points with your opponent's current life points. So essentially when you activate Reversal Quiz, you're hoping to make that life point change. So the way to play a Reversal Quiz deck is that you basically destroy your own life points to just about able to be destroyed. Then you'll play Reversal Quiz to switch your life with your opponents, but when you play Reversal Quiz, you'll have some contingency plans in place that essentially as soon as you successfully swap your life with your opponent, you will have cards that will be able to immediately burn them for the remaining life. So it's a very it creates a tricky gameplay style where you're mostly it is kind of like you are stalling essentially, but you also need to be manipulating your life points in a way and constantly calculating when you can go for the big push to end the game. Important to note with Reversal Quiz that you do have to send all cards in your hand and on your side of the field to the graveyard, but that does mean you need to have at least a card in your hand and a card on your field to send to the graveyard in order to activate this. But that's not something that's too hard to do. Just keep that in mind. Don't play out your hand before playing Reversal Quiz. So just a little context about what Reversal Quiz does before we get into the card by card. Starting off with our monsters that we are playing in the Reversal Quiz deck, I am playing 3 copies of Lava Golem. The Lava Golem I find is one of the most important cards to have in this deck as it serves 2 main purposes. A, you can use Lava Golem to tribute off an opponent's monster that might be able to negate cards that you play, specifically if they have something to negate a spell like Hope Harbinger. You need to get rid of that before you play Reversal Quiz because you don't want that to get negated. So Lava Golem allows you to do that as long as they have 2 monsters. But also Lava Golem has a nice secondary purpose where it will burn your opponent for 1,000 life points during their standby phase. So you can give them a Lava Golem before you activate Reversal Quiz, and it allows you to account for an extra 1,000 damage to be done to your opponent after you pass turn during their standby phase if they don't have a way to negate it. So definitely helps with that post-Reversal Quiz burn damage for game and gets rid of problematic negates. We are, very happy to have Lava Golem included. Next up, we are playing 3 copies of Curry Photon. Curry Photon is a nice little hand trap monster that allows us during either player's turn, send this card from your hand to the graveyard and pay 2,000 life points, and you take no damage during this turn. So, if you're going to get your life points just about where you can Reversal Quiz burn them, you can Curry Photon to protect it, and the paying 2,000 is actually very useful because we need to be manipulating our own life points, getting it just low enough to burn our opponent in the combo. So definitely becomes my preferred battle trap over something like you know, Battle Fader or Swift Scarecrow, just because the paying life points is important for the manipulation, and you know, it blocks all damage, which is pretty cool. You know, gets it just in time. So 3 Curry Photon. Next up, and this is the last of our monsters, I am playing 3 copies of Card D. This is mostly a stall deck where we're just trying to buy time and slowly whittle our life points away before we can play Reversal Quiz. So there's not too much we're doing with our monsters. Card D helps us get through the deck. For a normal summon, you know, during your main phase 1, if this card was normal summon this turn, you can tribute this card to draw 2 cards and then immediately end your turn. So make sure you set your face downs before you play Card D. But, you know, you distribute Card D, draw 2 cards, pretty good, can get you into Curry Photon or whatnot to protect you next turn. But, you know, we need to dig through our deck really fast for the combo pieces and stall time until we do that. And so Card D works pretty well in a deck like this. And that is it for the monsters. Next, we are going into our spell cards that make up a majority of the deck. So I am playing 3 copies of Reversal Quiz, namesake of the deck. The card we need to get the combo going, so we play 3 because we want to see it as soon as possible. And I already talked about Reversal Quiz a little bit at the beginning of the video, but essentially we send all our hand and field to the graveyard, call the top card of the deck, whether it is a monster, trap, or spell, and if we are right, we switch life points with our opponent. So very important to be able to have your combo ready to burn your opponent for the rest of the life points after this is done. You got to make sure you have a card in your hand and on the field to send to the graveyard in order to activate this. And of course, a lot of part of the deck is that you want to know what the top card of your deck is. Now we have cards that we're going to show off in a second that will stack our deck for us so that we can get it guaranteed. But sometimes you might have to play Reversal Quiz. You're running out of options. You're not going to live another turn. You got to play Reversal Quiz before, and you got to make a guess. So you got to keep track of the ratios of what cards are left in your deck and make the best guess sometimes. The deck is a majority spells, so it's usually safe, but you have to keep in mind what you've already drawn, what's already in your grave, etc. Next up for spells, we are playing 3 copies of Fuma Shuriken. Now, this card is mostly in this deck because it has this effect that if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, inflicts 700 points of damage to your opponent's life points. So if you're at 700 or less life points and you have Reversal Quiz, you can just set a Fuma Shuriken before you play Reversal Quiz. Fuma Shuriken will go to the grave, Reversal Quiz will resolve. If you succeed, you'll switch your life, and then immediately after that resolves, Fuma Shuriken will activate after that, burning your opponent for the remaining life points. And of course you can stack these, so if you had all 3 Fuma Shuriken to set, you could do 2,100 damage. But another card that we definitely want to see, so I am playing 3 of it, and one of your main ways to burn additional life points and get yourself in a position to finish off the opponent after you play Reversal Quiz. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Spellbook Organization. This is a spell card that just states that you look at the top 3 cards of your deck and then return them to the top of the deck in any order. So, you know, this is the card we play to get our deck stacked properly. You know, make sure we have a spell on top if we want to call spell, just so we know what we're going to call with Reversal Quiz and we'll guaranteed get it right. Outside of that, there's, you know, pretty much only useful as a combo starter, but you can sometimes use this if you have multiple copies and you need your next draw to be really good. You could stack the deck beforehand to top deck a Pot of Extravagance or a powerful draw tool or just a powerful stall tool, maybe stack the Reversal Quiz, whichever missing combo piece. So do note that if you have multiple spellbook organizations, as long as you have another one ready to go, don't be afraid to play one to stack your deck for just an optimal draw. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance. The card is just Pot of Greed. You banish 3 to 6 random extra deck cards face down, which is fine because we don't really use extra deck cards in this deck at all. And of course, you draw 1 card for every 3 that you did so. So you banish 6, draw 2. Now what's important, and that this does come up in this deck, is that you can't use any other draw effects the turn you play this card, which means you're not going to be able to use card D, or a couple other cards that are in here. But it's usually not a big deal. The +2 is still worth it, and just save your card D for a future turn. It will usually get you into something to stall for a turn, a Curry Photon, or just one of our stall cards. So, and still working out pretty well for me, so I wouldn't be too worried about some of the anti-synergies it brings. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Pot of Duality. This card, I waver from 2 to 3 on this. It's a very good card. You reveal the top 3 cards of your deck, and then you add 1 of them to your hand and shuffle the rest back into your deck. Very good card. You can't special summon the turn you use it, which is important if you need to use Lava Golem. Don't let that, if you need to use Lava Golem, make sure you don't play this and then lock yourself out of that. But otherwise, that effect is basically not a punishment at all. And of course, with that being such a good card, 3 duality is certainly warranted. I sometimes have issue with this card just because you do draw a lot of cards in your deck and you can only activate 1 Pot of Duality a turn. And I just found a couple times I had too many dualities that were dead when I would rather it be 1 of the other cards. So currently trying it 2, but I waver. Sometimes I want it back at 3. Right now I'm playing it 2, but it's very worth running at 3. So don't be afraid to run it at 3 if you like it at 3. Next up, just some additional draw power. This is kind of what I've subbed my 1 duality for, because I can play this card on the same turn as a duality. It's just Upstart Goblin. You draw a card from your deck and your opponent gains 1,000 life. Now that giving your opponent 1,000 life is pretty important because we have some other cards that synergize with that, wanting to boost our opponent's life so that the difference in our life points can be greater. And so you can't play this card with Pot of Extravagance, but you can play it with Duality. I don't find it that much of a drawback, so yep, I'm just playing 1 Upstart instead. Next up, another just solid draw card, 1 Day of Peace. Each player draws 1 card from their deck, and then neither player takes damage until the end of your opponent's next turn. So buys you a turn, it gives you stall and gives you draw. This is not a very interactive deck, so giving your opponent 1 draw isn't usually the worst because you're not bothered by it anyway. You're just kind of ignoring your opponent and waiting for yourself to go off. So 1 Day of Peace. Next up, these are field spells to kind of play and stall things out. I have a copy of Mystic Mine. I would certainly run more copies of Mystic Mine, but this is the only copy of Mystic Mine I have. So Mystic Mine, notoriously powerful stall tool that a lot of the Yu-Gi-Oh community, rightfully doesn't like because it basically just halts game states completely. So if your opponent controls more monsters than you, your opponent's monsters cannot activate their monster effects or declare an attack. And if you control more monsters than your opponent does, your monsters can attack or use their effects. And of course, during the end phase, if both players control the same amount of monsters, destroy this card. So if your opponent's already gone, they have a monster or 2, you can play Mystic Mine and pretty much halt all their monster effects for the rest of the game, because other than card Ds that you will tribute off immediately, you will never summon monsters, and you don't have to worry about interacting with their monsters. So they would have to get rid of all their own monsters themselves. So very powerful stall tool, and you're not punished too hard by it, because even though it would theoretically negate a Lava Golem you gave to your opponent, when you play Reversal Quiz, you'll send all your cards from the field to the grave, which will include Mystic Mine. And then Lava Golem can activate, burn life point damage. So Mystic Mine's a pretty good card. I am limited by the fact that I only own 1 copy, so do note I would probably run 2, possibly even 3 copies. But I'm only running 2 field spells right now. So with that, with only 1 Mystic Mine in my possession, I am playing kind of a budget playground Mystic Mine called Fire Prison. Essentially what Fire Prison does is it makes it so that nobody can summon link monsters with a link rating lower than the highest one on the field. and monsters that are not link monsters can attack. So I'm kind of in a dual group that doesn't play too many link heavy decks. Lots of other extra deck summoning mechanics that are not link based are pretty popular in my dueling group. So Fire Prison is also an adequate stalling tool for just stopping my opponent from attacking. And if they don't have links built up already, they can't build up a whole lot more because they can't summon lower ranks. So, this is a very cheap card in sense. If you're in a playground environment that doesn't, with lots of players that don't play a ton of link monsters, and you're playing a stall deck, definitely a card worth looking at for a Mystic Mind substitute, which is what I'm doing. But of course, when I get more Mystic Minds, that card will be probably replaced by Mystic Mind. Next up, I'm playing a copy of Terraforming. This is a spell card that lets us search a field spell. Our field spells are pretty good. Thins the deck, gets us a field spell that stalls for a lot of time. Good card to have. And then last for my spells, I am playing 3 copies of Toon Table of Contents. This is just a deck thinner. Now, of course, you can play a 4th Toon card, maybe something like Toon Cyber Dragon, or just Toon World, which would have its own use in manipulating your life points. But I'm just fine with the 3 Toon Table of Contents, just because I don't know, you only want to see one of these cards, and then you want to thin out all the rest. And when I play 4, sometimes I often see 2 before I can do that. So just 3 Toon Table. Again, another card where, like, if you want to extend to the Toon World, very possible. I definitely have and sometimes do. I'm just not doing so at the current time. But 3 Toon Table of Contents, because you can play Toon Table to search Toon Table, then you can play that Toon Table to search that Toon Table. And, that just gets cards out of your deck, gets you closer to your combo, fills your deck with more spells too, so that if you have to make the wild guess on Reversal Quiz, you can guess spell pretty safely. And that is it for our spell cards. Next, we're looking at the trap cards we are playing in our deck. First, we're going to start with some of the stalling trap cards we have. 2 copies of Threatening Roar, just a trap card that says your opponent cannot declare an attack during this turn. So if you need to stall for a turn, make sure you don't get destroyed by battle this turn. You just flip Threatening Roar, stop that from happening. If you're worried about it getting negated, you can do it preemptively before your opponent builds a negate. But, pretty solid trap, just buys us time. And then, of course, 1 copy of Waboku. Pretty much serves the exact same function as Threatening Roar. It just makes it so that your opponent's monsters can't do any type of battle damage that turn. Probably just objectively a better version of Threatening Roar in this deck, but it doesn't matter too much, so I just sleeve the first 3 I could find. And it gives me the ability to talk about that, like, both these cards are good. So if you only have Threatening Roars or you only have Waboku, you can just max out on those. And then next up, some trap cards that allow us to draw. I am playing 3 copies of Reckless Greed. So Reckless Greed is essentially a trap card that says you draw 2 cards, and then after that you skip your next 2 draw phases. Reckless Greed can be pretty powerful because if you play 2 Reckless Greeds, you're going to draw 4 cards, but because of the wording on the card, you're only going to skip your next 2 draw phases instead of 4. So that gets you more cards quicker and with less of a drawback. And what's really nice about Reckless Greed too is if you have the Reckless Greed set, you can chain your Reckless Greeds on your draw or standby phase. So you can draw your card, then chain your Reckless Greed, and if Reckless Greed draws you into Pot of Extravagance, well then you already drew off of Reckless Greed, and it does not stop you from playing the Extravagance, because Extravagance only limits you from drawing after Extravagance is played, but not before. So you can Reckless Greed in your draw or standby phase and Extravagance on the same turn. Pretty powerful. That gets you so many cards so quickly. If you resolve that, you're probably in a pretty safe state where you can pretty much guarantee you're going to win the game. So Reckless Greed, definitely pretty cool. Also a nice chainable trap, so you can set it, and if your opponent wants to play Back Row Hate, just about all your traps are chainable, so you don't get punished too hard. And then next, for further draw power, I am playing 3 copies of Hope for Escape. Hope for Escape, you activate this card if your opponent's life points are at least 1,000 higher than yours. Then you pay 1,000 life points to draw a card for every 2,000 life points difference between you and your opponent. So this card draws you cards, it manipulates your life points, it manually lowers them, both things that we want in this deck, so it's just kind of a given for this. You know, this is where the Upstart 1,000 gain helps, and you know, always keep your Hope for Escape in mind. You know, willingly take a little damage before you play a Waboku or Curry Photon if you want to get your life points real low and then draw the rest of your deck. You can stack Hope for Escape activations to pay multiple thousands of life points and get your life points even lower. And of course, like Reckless Greed, you can do this card during your draw or standby phase, draw into an Extravagance, and draw more cards. Very good, very powerful. Decks that are, you know, stall and draw decks. Hope for Escape has always been a classic. And last on the deck, we are playing 1 copy of Wall of Revealing Light. Limited continuous trap card that just says when you activate this card, pay any multiple of 1,000 life points, and then none of your opponent's monsters with attack equal to or lower than that can attack. So definitely a good stall tool, but the biggest draw is, of course, being able to pay any multiple of 1,000 life points means we can use this card to put ourselves directly in range to fire off Reversal Quiz and finish off our opponent. And that is great. You know, the stalling sometimes works out, which is great. But, you know, just because of that, seems like a good card. It has both those functionalities. So very happy to be playing it. Comes in quite handy. Very cool use of Wall of Revealing Light. And that is it for the main deck. Next, we'll briefly talk about our extra deck monsters. The extra deck is something that you will basically never actually go into. It's mostly in here for extravagance fodder, but that doesn't mean we can't do something with it. And my recommendation, of course, with a lot of these decks where I don't use the extra deck, is build your extra deck so that you can play Waking the Dragon in the sideboard. Waking the Dragon is a trap card that basically you set, and if it goes to your graveyard or banish zone because of an opponent's card effect, you can special summon any monster from your deck or extra deck. And so there are some really powerful extra deck monsters you can summon for free and sometimes auto win the game. And it does, having the ability to side Waking the Dragon gives you an alternate win con, which, you know, is oftentimes, you know, alternate win con decks, you know, there's a couple things that can out it. They're pretty one note, so if your opponent has a way to play around it, then you're in a bad spot. So having a surprise alternate win con can help out a bunch. So going into that, I'm just going to show off my Waking the Dragon targets. All these cards are being played at 3 of because we want to make sure we don't banish everything off of Extravagance. So first off, we're starting with Last Warrior from Another Planet. Just a card that basically says, you know, while this card is on the field, neither player can summon monsters. So if your opponent destroyed all your back row, had nothing on board, and they don't have much spell or trap removal, you could summon Last Warrior and pretty much kind of shut them out of the game. You know, they'll be able to set things, but you'll be able to poke through that, and you can play your spells and traps and, you know, go through your deck without much opposition. You know, just sit on Last Warrior. Nothing can ever be summoned. So you can just sit on that until you get your Reversal Quiz combo, or you can poke them down with it. So good card to summon in the right situation. Next up is 2 copies of Naturia Exterio. Now, Naturia Exterio is a pretty powerful card. It just essentially lets you negate spells or traps by banishing a card from your graveyard and then sending the top card of your deck to the graveyard. It's not once per turn, so if a deck is super spell or trap dependent and needs them to be able to function at all, you can sometimes summon Exterio and just auto win a game. I would play 3 of this card if I have it, but I only have 2, so to substitute, I am playing a third I'm playing 1 copy of Naturia Beast. It's just exterior, but it only allows you to negate spells, which is fine. Mostly, that's usually what you need it for anyway. You just send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard, and then you banish a spell. So, not bad. Pretty solid. Gets the job done. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon. I used to only have one of this card for the longest time if you've seen previous deck profiles, but reprints just came out in El Dorado, so, you know, easy way to pick this card up if you don't have it. But essentially, Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon is a 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by card effects. So, you know, makes it very hard to out. You either have to beat it by battle, or you have to kaiju it, or, you know, just a very limited amount of ways to out this card. And if an opponent doesn't have access to those few ways, they weren't playing kaijus or something, then Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon can kind of just shut out the game, so they can't do anything. So definitely keep an eye on how your opponent's playing to see if that's the right choice. Next, I'm playing 3 copies of Yugioh Final Sigma. This is a weaker version of Ultimate Falcon because it only has 3,000 attack, but it is also unaffected by card effects except Mathmech cards while in your extra monster zone, and you can gladly summon this to your extra monster zone because you're not going to put anything else in there. Does have a little bonus that if it battles an opponent's monster and does battle damage to it, that battle damage is doubled. Very cool. But other than that, basically you would summon it if you were out of Ultimate Falcons. And then last, I'm playing 3 copies of Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon. This is a 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. So that effect's not as good, of course, as being unaffected by card effects. But, you know, sometimes in certain decks, if they can only target and destroy stuff, this card is good enough. And the extra 4,500 attack power is quite nice to have. In addition, you can use Alternative Dragon's effect to pop a card on the field instead of attacking. So that can be pretty useful, enough that I like having 3 as kind of the last Waking the Dragon target in the deck. And those are the Waking the Dragon targets. Of course, if you had the Blackwing Full Armor Master, that's a pretty good one too. And just a good card to keep in mind. You can show it off, and also, we'll warn that sometimes at tournaments it can be rulings nightmares because you normally need a judge who knows how to explain it, because you're always going to get that judge call that because folks won't understand how it works, which is fine. But yep, very fun deck that I enjoy playing. Not necessarily fun for the opponent, but I like the wacky gimmick. I like alternate win cons like that, and you know. Outside of the reversal quiz combo, this deck has a core of a lot of just general stall and draw, so you can kind of use lots of these cards to facilitate other different alternate win combos. I know I used to smoke screen into Jackpot 7, just so if they were trying to play around reversal quiz, I would hit them with a different alternate win con. So you might see that here soon. Yeah, just pretty cool. Let me know in the comments what your favorite alternate win con type deck is, and appreciate you checking it out. I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks.